Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our series, Great Ideas in Psychology. This is part 11. And as you might recall in the previous part 10, where we reached the midpoint in the series, I invited officially commentary and feedback on my presentation and on the ideas that we have covered so far. And we have received until now 2 commentaries, one under video number 9 and one under video number 10. And if we don't have any more commentary, any more feedback from other viewers, then I'll choose from the 2 people who have already written. Otherwise, if you have more people, then I'll select from a larger pool of candidates to send a signed copy of my book, Experimental Psychology and Human Agency. All right, let's get to today's presentation, which is based on chapter 11, attachment. What attachment is and why it is important, why it is a central idea, a core concept in psychology in development. The cover of our book, the main source, again, written by Fatali Moaddam, Great Ideas in Psychology, a cultural and historical introduction. And our place in the plan of the course. Attachment is our topic today. Attachment and its importance is not a new idea. It is an old idea. It is essentially the idea that how infants are cared for and socialized early in their lives will in important ways influence their later psychological development and life as adults. So now, although this has been with us, this idea is an old idea, it has appeared in a specific way in modern research, psychological research. So it is now a core organizing idea behind modern research on attachment. Well, this idea, organizing idea, is attachment, which refers to an observed bonding between the young of many species and their primary caregivers, typically a mother. The idea of attachment itself has a special role in psychology. It has a special status because of how it can challenge certain approaches in psychology and how it can highlight and bring into our view some approaches that might not be as prominent, as popular. So psychology itself always is prone to becoming individualistic and focusing on isolated individuals and trying to explain things based on what is inside the individual's head. But the concept of attachment is one of those concepts that works against that bias, works against the individualistic and isolated bias in psychology. The focus in thinking about attachment is not on the internal psychological world. We read in the textbook that attachment is focused on relationships. And by focusing on attachment, what we are focusing on is relationships, on the world out there, on what is collaboratively constructed. Collaboratively, the collaboration between both the child, the infant, and the mother, the primary caregiver. So the attention is on what is collaboratively constructed and collectively upheld between the infant and the caregiver. Attachment is about the shared world. It is not even limited to that relationship. It is not even limited to that one particular relationship that the child has, the child enjoys. It is about the development of a world and the child's understanding of that world and how that world has opened up in the view of the child, in the experience of the child through that relationship with the mother. So a mother isn't just introducing herself to the child. The mother is introducing a world to the child. The kind of world that the child is living in is kind of like an ambassador. The mother is an ambassador of a worldview, of a view into a view of the world, certain beliefs about what the world is, how the world is. That relationship reflects that world. Why is the mother important? Now, there are certain schools in psychology that are quite strict in their views of mother-child relationships because they generally are strict. They are generally rigid, and they want to fit all the different parts of psychology in their own rigid categories. So for behaviorists, for example, mother happens to be the first source of food. So there will be classical conditioning. And the reason why mother becomes important is because she becomes attached or associated, classically associated to the experience of feeding, breastfeeding. Freudian psychoanalysis, according to some readings of it, also gives primacy to feeding. And then psychological consequences grow around that. So in general, in psychoanalysis, mother responds to a lack in the child, primarily hunger, it's deficiency, drive, and this addressing of this need enables the child's healthy development. But again, food is given primacy. There are other thinkers like Erik Erikson or Mary C. Bateson that have a wider and more flexible, have a richer view of the mother-child relationship. Erikson believes that the relationship is the place, the mother-child relationship is the place where the child learns about trust, which then becomes a central disposition, emotional disposition that the child brings into later experiences. That relationship with the caregiver is the place where the first crisis of the life of the person is resolved. Mary Bateson talks about the relationship, embodied affective relationship between the infant and the mother as a kind of proto-conversation, because there's a lot of back and forth in that and mutual sensitivity to reading each other's signals and letting the other person know, each one let the other person know how they are feeling. And they organize each other. They organize each other's behaviors. All right, so here's another passage from the book. Because human infants are utterly dependent on caregivers, the issue of trust is supremely important. The infant must develop a strong sense of trust in the reliability of the caregiver to feed, protect, comfort, and support in all the ways necessary for successful survival. So trust is something that children enact without really deciding. The life of the child involves a tacit trust that the child projects onto the caregiver. Trust, what is trust? Why is it so important? Is trust just a good feeling we have? It is not just a good feeling. It is the basis of our independence, or a sense of independence, a sense of our place and relative autonomy. Some degree of autonomy can only arise out of a sense of trust and a basis of comfort. So here's another passage. In cases where the infant successfully bonds with the mother, typically the primary caregiver, and develops a healthy sense of trust, it is possible to move on and build a sense of independence or autonomy. So the child projects and takes this risk without really wanting, but necessarily begins by trusting the caregiver, similar to the imprinting that we see in other animals, like the demonstration by Konrad Lorenz. The baby geese begin by imprinting, begin with a sense of trust. They won't say, oh, who are you? Who is this creature who is walking? Can we trust him? Can we trust this creature? No, they just begin by following. And that is an enactment of the trust. You behave, and the sense of trust in a lower non-conceptual way, pre-conceptual way, is shown and expressed in behavior, in instinctive behavior. Another kind of disturbing but quite informative demonstrations were done by Harry Harlow. I believe, if I remember correctly, these are from 1950s studies with baby monkeys who were separated from their mother. Each baby monkey was separated from his or her mother, and each monkey was placed in a cage and had access to two fake mothers, two so-called surrogate stationary mothers. And one of these surrogate mothers was made of metal wire. The other one was made of cloth, or was covered with cloth. And in different conditions, a milk bottle was attached to one of these two fake mothers. What Harlow observed was regardless of where the milk bottle is, the baby monkey spends more time in contact with the soft cloth figure. And this preference for the soft figure becomes even more obvious when the baby monkey is fearful of something or stressed, like when the baby monkey hears a noise. This study has clear implication about the needs of a baby monkey, the needs of an infant. It has clear implications that attachment is based on a need for comfort and security, and it is not just about food. So even if you put the milk bottle next to the metal wires, the baby will not spend most of the time there. So that need for comfort and security is primary. So Harlow discussed the concept of love there and said love is not just about feeding, even for babies. Another central person in the study of attachment, thinking about attachment, is John Bowlby. And Bowlby's views were shaped by, we read in the text that how his views were based on practical experiences of working with children who had serious behavioral problems. And these included children that were separated from their parents because of the World War, and children who regularly got into trouble with the law, and they were placed in juvenile homes. So Bowlby observed that the child-parent relationship isn't about food. Also, he came to that conclusion based on the case histories, case studies, and he also concluded that it is about the need for bonding, and that bonding is a deep physiological and emotional need. Bowlby studied the emotional sense of loss, which is associated with low confidence and self-worth, that is experienced by children as a result of being rejected or abandoned by caregivers. Bowlby also did something. He proposed a series of stages in the development of attachment and how a child goes through these stages and becomes relatively autonomous, gains some sense of self and autonomy. We won't get into the details of these stages, just want to create some kind of familiarity about the names. And there are 4 stages: pre-attachment, beginning of attachment, clear-cut attachments, where you can visibly see signs of attachment and what kind of attachment we are dealing with. And then from that 3rd stage, the child enters into a kind of partnership. So gets past, the child ideally, hopefully, gets past that attachment and develops a kind of partnership and collaboration with the caregiver. In the first pre-attachment stage, the child is not that much aware of the mother, say, or the caregiver, even though there are still sensitivities to smell and things like that. But in the 2nd stage, the child becomes more sensitive, and it is in the 3rd stage that we see typical, either the successful attachment or failure of attachment in various ways. And one person who was influenced and a collaborator of John Bowlby was Mary Ainsworth. And one of the contributions of Mary Ainsworth was a kind of a paradigm, a kind of situation for the study of attachment and attachment styles, which is called the strange room, the strange situation, excuse me. I said a strange room. It is a room, but it is referred to as a strange situation. This strange situation is a paradigm for the study of attachment in children. So we read about this strange situation. A mother and infant are introduced to a room where the infant has the opportunity to play with toys. No other person is present at first. Then a stranger enters into the room. The stranger tries to keep the infant's attention while the mother leaves the room. After a few moments, the mother returns to the room. Throughout these steps, the behavior of the infant is closely observed. So you can imagine these things happening in a strange room. There are toys, there are two places to sit, one for the stranger, one for the mother. The mother is absent, and then the mother returns at the end. The type of attachment that the child demonstrates is demonstrated in the behavior of the child. This attachment is revealed according to the assumptions of the strange situation. The type of attachment is revealed when the mother returns to the room. And so the psychologist is asking, how do children react to the return of the mother? In the secure attachments, I'm just repeating the assumptions of the paradigm. There might be exceptions. You might be critical of this, the validity or reliability of the strange situation, but we want to understand what people who developed it and people who use it think. And they think that if the child's attachment is secure, what they do is that they're happy to see the mother return, and then they keep playing. There might be some children who are anxious and avoidant, and that's their attachment style. They feel anxiety, they have an attachment to the mother, but that attachment is colored by anxiety, and that anxiety leads them to avoid. So they look away when they see the mother return. They don't feel a pure feeling of happiness and joy. They look away a little bit. And the third, we could see children who are anxious and resistant, not just avoidant, but they actively resist. And these children show a high level of anxiety when the mother is present. When the mother is absent, they're also anxious, but with the presence of the mother, they also show anxiety. And that is a more intense experience for them, more intensity of anxiety shown compared to the avoidant style. There have been studies comparing cultures, different cultures, children in different cultures. So one that we read about in this textbook, cross-cultural comparisons in previous research. For example, people have said that there are higher numbers of anxious, resistant infants in places like Japan compared to the US. Also, people like Theodore Adorno, who wrote with a group of fellow researchers, collaborators, they were interested for a while in the so-called authoritarian personality. And they linked attachment style to authoritarian personality. And here's a passage about that. A group of researchers led by Theodore Adorno were studying the authoritarian personality characterized by being submissive and obedient to authority, but vindictive toward minorities and nonconformists. Authoritarians are more likely to support anti-democratic leaders and movements. Adorno and his colleagues concluded that authoritarians are more likely to be raised by mothers who were withdrawn, less responsive and aloof from the child. So with statements like this, you don't have to agree with it, but what we get a sense that psychology isn't just an isolated field of study. The domain of psychology is not separable from other domains, like how society functions, how norms in society functions, how politics functions, how people are raised has implications and consequences about their participations in political forms of life. And it begins, according to thinkers of attachment style, it begins with the relationship between the child and the caregiver. So the caregiver provides a secure base where the child learns that they can feel comfortable. They go away from this secure base, but they still have in mind what kind of base it is. And are they going to welcome back in that place, or are they going to be yelled at or scolded for playing wrong or not playing not playing in a brief enough period of time? Children can be scolded for so many reasons when they return to the parent, and that doesn't really reflect necessarily what they did. It might just reflect the mood of the parent, but that can influence the beliefs and the sense that the child has about the security and trust of the parent with the parent. So this is why attachment is about creating a relationship as well as creating a model of reality, a model of the world. So the child learns to be willing and enthusiastic to play, to leave the parent for a time to play in the playground with peers, be able to develop relationships in the future, and then develop their own parenting style. This probably reminded you of Lev Vygotsky's ideas about collaborative construction of reality, constructing the world with the adult providing supportive structure for that construction of reality. Later in life, the child becomes the adult and then conserves or preserves, gives further support to the same kind of social structures, social norms that they received probably when they were growing up. Again, types of relationships are associated with the emotional life of the person and also the kind of worldview, the view of the world, the sense of the world, implicitly or explicitly, that they have. There are marks of attachment that we can observe, scientists observe in the lab, in more or less naturalistic settings. And these marks of attachments include biobehavioral synchrony. And they believe that these marks of attachment, these marks of bonding evolved from lower forms of group behavior that people observe in insects and in birds and even in primates. Mimicry is a mark of attachment. It is mediated by the chemical oxytocin, and it is mutually reinforcing. So oxytocin reinforces mimicry and bonding and mimicry influence oxytocin. There is a host of markers that indicate the presence of attachment or stable bonds between people. They include behavioral markers, heart rate coupling. So when heart rates become similar, endocrine fit. So the immune system becomes better fit to protect the body, and even the frequency of brain activity, the dominant frequency in the two people's brain activities can also show synchrony and similarity. And to finish the discussion today, I want to talk about a study that I quite interesting. It was done by Strathern and colleagues in 2009, published in 2009. I used to talk about this study when I was teaching neuropsychology. I gave a lecture on emotions and bonds, human bonds, bonding, including attachment. So Strathern and colleagues, they were interested in how mothers react physiologically and neurologically, how their brains react to the emotions and activities of their children based on the mother's attachment style. So mother's attachment style, where does it come from? It comes from their own childhood, their own infancy. But you can, using questionnaires and other measures, you can get an estimate of the mother's attachment style. So they divided mothers into those with secure attachment style and insecure attachment style. It's their adult attachment style, so the way they relate. But it has a broader implication for how they relate to significant others. They showed these mothers photos of their babies, or they had these mothers watch their babies play. And they recorded the brain activities and oxytocin level in the mothers as they were observing their children, their babies. So you can divide the types of photos that they saw based on the affect, the emotion that the child is showing, and the identity of the child. The child could be either their own child or an unknown child, and the emotion expressed on the face of the child could be happy, neutral, or sad. You see, there are differences in brain activity depending on the attachment style of the mother. We don't need to get into the detail of their locations, what the locations mean, but let's say the mother who has a secure attachment style is seeing a picture of their own infant laughing, expressing positive emotion, happy emotion. Mothers with a secure attachment style, feeling secure, they show stronger activity in the left medial prefrontal cortex, but the same activity is not observed in mothers with insecure attachment style. Again, there are differences in mother's reaction, brain response to a negative expressions in the infant's face. There's a high degree of activity in the insula in mothers who have insecure attachment style, or who had in that study, and right ventral striatum is activated in mothers with secure attachment style. You can check out the study if you want to see more detail. One last part of the study that I also found quite interesting was mothers with secure attachment style released oxytocin when they saw the free play of their infants. But the same was not observed in mothers with insecure or dismissing attachment styles. So the emotional life of a mother, according to this study, is different, and it is influenced by the attachment style that they have as adults, and which was formed through their own early life experiences. Attachment is something that the style of our attachment is something that is open to change, open to revision. It is difficult to change it, but it is possible to change. And studies like this might give us an extra incentive to work on our attachment style and improve it, create a more secure basis for ourselves and for our significant others, especially our children. All right, it's good for today for this chapter. Next, we will talk about displaced aggression. And once again, if you enjoy this series, please consider supporting the channel, supporting me and the channel through these various means. Otherwise, thank you very much for your attention, and we will continue the series next time.